There are some people in this world who carry secrets so heavy that you would never guess just by looking at them. They walk past you on the street, they serve you coffee, they hold the door open for you, and you never stop to wonder what dreams they once had or what life took away from them. This is the story of one such man, a man who worked as a delivery driver at one of the most expensive hotels in downtown Chicago. A man nobody paid attention to. A man whose hands once made audiences weep with the beauty of his music. He was 34 years old when this story begins. Every morning, he woke up at 5, put on his faded uniform, and caught 2 buses to reach the Grand Monarch Hotel. It was the kind of place where a single night cost more than his monthly rent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceilings. The floors were polished marble that reflected the light like mirrors. Wealthy guests walked through the lobby in designer clothes, barely noticing the staff who made their comfort possible. And he was one of those invisible people. His job was simple. He moved things: luggage carts, room service trays, laundry bags, packages. Whatever needed to go from one place to another, he carried it. He never complained. He never made trouble. He just did his work quietly and went home at the end of each shift. But there was one thing at the hotel that always made him pause, even if just for a second. Near the center of the grand lobby, right beside the marble fountain, sat a piano. Not just any piano. It was a Steinway Model D. A concert grand worth more than most cars. Its black surface gleamed under the warm lights. The keys were perfect, untouched, waiting. A small velvet rope surrounded it with a polished sign that read, "For professional performers only." Every time he passed that piano, something inside him ached. You see, most people at the hotel thought he was just another worker with no story worth telling. They assumed he had always been a delivery driver, that this was the ceiling of his ambitions, but the truth was something entirely different. 20 years ago, he was a boy with a gift that teachers called extraordinary. His mother had noticed it first. When he was only 4, he climbed onto the bench of an old piano at his grandmother's house and started pressing keys. At first, it was just noise. But within minutes, he was picking out melodies he had heard on the radio. His tiny fingers moved with a purpose that made the adults in the room go silent. His mother, a single woman who worked double shifts at a laundromat, saved every extra penny she had. She sold things she loved. She gave up small joys, all so her son could take piano lessons from a real teacher. And he did not waste her sacrifice. By the time he was 10, he was performing at local churches and community events. By 15, he was winning state competitions. By 18, he had earned a full scholarship to one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. His professors said he had a rare combination of technical skill and emotional depth. One of them, an older man who had trained some of the greatest pianists of his generation, once told him that he could hear the weight of lived experience in his playing, that he did not just play the notes but made people feel them in their bones. For a few beautiful years, it seemed like his dreams were within reach. He imagined concert halls, recording contracts, a life filled with music. He imagined making his mother proud in ways she had never dared to hope for. But life does not always care about our plans. During his 3rd year at the music school, his mother got sick. It started with tiredness, then pain, then hospital visits that became longer and more frequent. The diagnosis was cruel, the treatment was expensive, the bills piled up like a mountain that no amount of hope could climb. He made a choice. The same choice that countless children of struggling parents have made throughout history. He left school. He came home. He took whatever jobs he could find to help pay for her care. His mother fought hard. She fought for 3 years. And in the end, she lost. After she was gone, he found himself buried in debt, exhausted in every possible way, and completely disconnected from the world of music that had once been his entire identity. The piano felt like a memory from someone else's life. Touching the keys brought back too much pain. So, he stopped. Years passed. The debt slowly shrank. He moved from job to job until he landed at the Grand Monarch Hotel. It was stable work. It paid the bills. It asked nothing of his heart, and so he became invisible. The other staff members knew almost nothing about him. He was polite but quiet. He ate lunch alone in the back hallway near the loading dock. When coworkers made small talk, he gave short answers and gentle smiles, but never shared much about himself. Some thought he was shy. Others thought he was just boring. Nobody thought to ask if there was more to his story. The managers certainly did not see him as anything special. To them, he was a pair of hands that moved heavy things without complaining. One manager in particular, a tall man with slicked back hair and an expensive watch, seemed to enjoy reminding staff members of their place. He spoke to housekeepers and drivers with a tone of casual disrespect, as if their jobs made them less human. He never bothered to learn their names. He simply snapped his fingers or pointed when he wanted something done. This was the world our pianist lived in. Silent, small, forgotten, but everything was about to change. It was a Friday evening in late October. The hotel was buzzing with unusual energy. Luxury cars lined up outside the entrance. Men in tailored suits and women in glittering gowns streamed through the revolving doors. Tonight was the annual charity gala, one of the biggest events on the Chicago social calendar. The ballroom was decorated with flowers that cost more than a week of his salary. Champagne towers sparkled under golden lights. The guest list included politicians, business leaders, and celebrities. And he had been called in for extra work. He did not mind. Extra hours meant extra money. He moved through the service corridors with his usual quiet efficiency, delivering supplies, adjusting equipment, staying out of the way of the important people. Through the walls, he could hear the muffled sound of laughter and clinking glasses. At one point, his path took him through the edge of the grand lobby. He paused for just a moment beside the velvet rope. The Steinway sat there, silent and beautiful, its keys glowing softly in the evening light. He had not touched a piano in nearly 7 years. He stared at it for a long breath, feeling that familiar ache rise in his chest. Then he shook his head slightly, adjusted the card in his hands, and kept walking. He had no idea that within the next hour, his entire life would be different. That the piano he had walked past so many times would become the stage for a moment nobody in that hotel would ever forget. That the very people who had looked through him like he was made of glass would soon be staring at him with tears in their eyes. But all of that was still waiting in the wings. For now, he was just a delivery driver, invisible among the beautiful and the powerful, carrying boxes while a grand piano sat untouched nearby, waiting. Inside the ballroom, the gala was in full swing. Hundreds of guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, their jewelry catching the light with every movement. Waiters glided between groups carrying silver trays of champagne and tiny appetizers that looked more like art than food. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Everything was perfect. Everything except one very important detail. The entertainment had fallen apart. The hotel had booked a well-known pianist for the evening. He was supposed to be the highlight, playing sophisticated background music during dinner and then performing a short concert for the guests. But just 2 hours before the event started, the pianist's manager had called with terrible news: food poisoning. The man could barely stand, let alone perform. He would not be coming. The hotel staff scrambled. They called every backup musician in their contacts. Nobody was available on such short notice. They searched online for last-minute performers. Nothing worked out. As the minutes ticked by, the panic in the back offices grew stronger. And nobody was more frustrated than the general manager. He was a man in his early 50s with silver hair combed back tightly and a suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. He had worked in luxury hotels for over 20 years and had clawed his way up to this position through sheer ambition and a complete lack of warmth. He ran the Grand Monarch with an iron fist. Every detail had to be perfect. Every event had to go smoothly. His reputation depended on it. Tonight, his reputation was in danger. He stood near the entrance of the ballroom, watching the guests with a forced smile while his mind raced. The beautiful Steinway piano sat in the lobby, silent and useless. Some guests had already noticed and made comments. A few had joked about the expensive decoration gathering dust. Each comment felt like a personal insult to him. He needed a solution. And he needed it now. His assistant approached nervously. She was a young woman who had learned quickly that bringing bad news to this man was never pleasant. "Sir, we still cannot find anyone," she said quietly. The agencies have no one available. I have tried everyone on our list. He turned to her with cold eyes. Then try harder. This is unacceptable. Do you understand what kind of people are in that room? Do you know how this makes us look? She nodded quickly and hurried away to make more calls. He rubbed his temples and muttered under his breath. This was supposed to be his night to shine. The hotel owner herself was attending the gala. Important donors and city officials were everywhere, and here he was, with a silent piano and no performer. That was when he noticed movement near the service corridor. A man in a delivery uniform was pushing a cart of linens through the edge of the lobby. He moved quietly, head down, trying to stay invisible as workers often do during fancy events. The general manager barely registered him at first. Staff members were like furniture to him. Necessary but not worth noticing. But something made him pause. The delivery driver had stopped near the piano. He was looking at it with an expression the manager could not quite read. It was not the usual curious glance that most people gave the beautiful instrument. It was something deeper, something almost painful. The manager frowned. Why was this worker staring at the piano like that? Did he think he could touch it? Did he have any idea what that instrument was worth? You there, he called out sharply. The delivery driver looked up, startled. He seemed unsure if the manager was talking to him. Yes, you. Come here. The man hesitated for a moment, then left his cart and walked over. He kept his eyes low, the way people do when they are used to being treated as less than. What were you looking at? The manager demanded. Nothing, sir. Just passing through. You were staring at that piano. The delivery driver did not answer right away. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, quickly hidden. I used to play, he said quietly. A long time ago. The manager almost laughed out loud. This man? This worker in his wrinkled uniform and scuffed shoes? Playing a Steinway concert grand? You used to play, he repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. What? At birthday parties? Church choir practice? A few nearby staff members had stopped to watch. They could sense what was happening. They had seen this manager humiliate workers before for his own amusement. The delivery driver remained calm. I studied music seriously once. Before life got in the way. Life got in the way, the manager mocked. He looked around at the watching staff with a smirk, inviting them to share in the joke. Most of them looked uncomfortable but said nothing. They could not afford to challenge him. The manager turned back to the delivery driver with a sudden gleam in his eye. An idea had formed. Perhaps he could salvage this disaster after all, or at least have some entertainment while he figured things out. Tell you what, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. We have a little problem tonight. Our pianist canceled. That beautiful instrument over there is sitting empty, and our guests are getting bored. He stepped closer to the delivery driver, looking him up and down with obvious contempt. If you think you can play, go ahead. Prove it. Give us a real performance, something worth listening to, and I will personally hand you $500 right here in front of everyone. A murmur went through the small crowd of staff members. $500 was more than most of them earned in a week, but the manager was not finished. However, he continued with a cold smile. If you sit down at that piano and embarrass yourself, which we both know you will, then you will spend the rest of the month cleaning the grease traps in the kitchen, every single night after your regular shift. Do we have a deal? The watching staff exchanged glances. This was cruel even by his standards. The grease traps were disgusting work, the kind of punishment nobody wanted. The delivery driver stood very still, his face showed nothing. But something was happening behind his eyes. Something was shifting. The manager leaned in, enjoying himself now. What is the matter? I thought you said you could play. Or was that just talk? Are you going to run back to your little cart and pretend this never happened? Silence hung in the air. The delivery driver looked past the manager toward the piano. The beautiful black instrument sat there under the warm lights, waiting just as it always had. For 7 years, he had walked past it without stopping. For 7 years, he had buried the musician inside himself under layers of grief and survival. But tonight, something was different. Maybe it was the way the manager spoke to him. Maybe it was the memory of his mother selling her ring so he could have lessons. Maybe it was simply that he had been invisible for too long, and something inside him finally refused to stay hidden. He took a slow breath. "I will do it," he said quietly. The manager blinked, clearly not expecting this answer. Then he laughed and clapped his hands together. "Wonderful. This is going to be entertaining. Everyone, gather around. Our delivery boy here thinks he is a concert pianist." A few guests from the gala had drifted into the lobby, curious about the commotion. They stood at the edges, champagne glasses in hand, watching with mild interest. The delivery driver did not look at them. He did not look at the smirking manager or the nervous staff members. He simply walked toward the piano. Each step steady and deliberate. He reached the velvet rope and unclipped it carefully. He set it aside. Then he stood before the Steinway, running his fingers lightly along its polished surface. It was the first time he had touched a piano in 7 years. The wood was smooth and cool beneath his fingertips. He sat down on the bench and adjusted his position. His hands hovered over the keys for a moment. The manager crossed his arms, already preparing his victory speech. The staff watched with pity in their eyes. The wandering guests whispered to each other. Nobody in that room had any idea what was about to happen. Nobody knew that in the next few moments, everything would change. The delivery driver closed his eyes, took one more breath, and placed his fingers on the keys. The first note floated through the lobby like a whisper. It was soft, almost hesitant, as if testing whether it still belonged in this world. Then came the second note, and the third, and suddenly something shifted in the air. The random sounds became a melody, and that melody became something no one in that room was prepared for. He had chosen to play one of the most emotionally demanding pieces ever written for piano. It was a piece he had performed at his final recital before leaving music school, back when his mother was still alive, back when he still believed his dreams were possible. He had not touched it in 7 years, but his fingers remembered. His heart remembered. The music started gently, like a story being told by someone who has carried pain for a very long time. The notes rose and fell like breathing, like waves on a quiet shore. There was sadness in it, but also something beautiful, something that made you want to stop whatever you were doing and just listen. The manager, who had been standing with his arms crossed and a smirk on his face, let his arms drop slowly to his sides. The smirk faded. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The staff members who had gathered to watch what they expected to be an embarrassing disaster stood frozen in place. A housekeeper who had stopped to see the commotion felt tears spring to her eyes without understanding why. A young bellboy forgot he was holding a guest's coat and let it slip to the floor without noticing. And the music kept building. His fingers moved across the keys with a grace that seemed impossible for hands that had spent years pushing carts and carrying luggage. There was no hesitation now. The uncertainty of that first note had vanished completely. In its place was something powerful and alive, something that had been sleeping inside him for 7 long years and was finally waking up. The melody grew more complex. His left hand created a foundation of deep, resonant chords, while his right hand danced above them, painting pictures in sound. The piano seemed to come alive under his touch, responding to every subtle shift in pressure, every tiny movement of his wrists and fingers. People began to emerge from the ballroom. At first, it was just a few curious guests who had heard something unusual drifting through the doors. They stepped into the lobby with their champagne glasses, expecting to find the hired entertainment finally performing. Instead, they found a man in a delivery uniform seated at the grand piano, playing with a mastery that made them catch their breath. Word spread quickly. More guests came, then more. The lobby began to fill with men in expensive suits and women in glittering gowns, all standing in silence, all watching the impossible scene before them. He did not notice any of it. His eyes were closed. He was somewhere else entirely. He was in his mother's small apartment, practicing on the old upright piano she had saved for months to buy. He was on the stage at his music school, hearing his professor tell him he had a gift that could not be taught. He was sitting beside his mother's hospital bed, holding her hand while she told him how proud she was, how she always knew he was meant for something special. The music swelled. It climbed higher and higher, building toward something enormous. His fingers flew across the keys with breathtaking speed, hitting every note with perfect precision. The technical difficulty of what he was playing would have challenged the finest concert pianists in the world. And he made it look effortless. A woman near the front of the crowd pressed her hand to her chest. Tears were streaming down her face, though she could not have explained exactly why. The music was reaching something deep inside her, touching emotions she did not even know she had. She was not the only one. Throughout the lobby, people were experiencing the same thing. Hardened businessmen who had not cried in decades felt their eyes grow wet. Young couples held each other's hands tighter. Even the staff members, who had seen countless performances in this hotel over the years, knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. This was not just skill. This was not just technique. This was a man pouring his entire soul into an instrument, sharing every joy and every heartbreak he had ever experienced through the language of music. The manager had backed away slowly until he was pressed against a marble pillar. His face had gone pale. He looked like a man who had just realized he had made a terrible mistake, though he did not yet understand how terrible. The piece reached its climax. The delivery driver's hands crashed down on the keys with tremendous power, filling the entire lobby with sound that seemed to shake the chandeliers. Then, just as suddenly, the music softened. It became gentle again, returning to that original whisper, that quiet sadness. But now there was something else in it. Hope, acceptance, peace. The final notes hung in the air like morning mist, soft and delicate, and heartbreakingly beautiful. His fingers lingered on the keys for one last moment, drawing out the sound until it faded into silence. Then, it was over. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence that followed the music was almost as powerful as the music itself. It was the kind of silence that happens when people have just experienced something sacred and do not want to break the spell. He opened his eyes slowly. He looked down at his hands on the keys, almost surprised to find himself there. It was as if he had traveled somewhere far away and was only now returning. Then the applause began. It started with a single person clapping near the back of the crowd. Then another joined in, and another. Within moments, the entire lobby erupted in thunderous applause. People cheered. People shouted. Some were still crying while they clapped. He turned on the piano bench to face the crowd, and for the first time, he seemed to realize how many people had gathered. The lobby was packed. Guests from the gala filled every available space. Staff members lined the walls. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on him, and every single person was on their feet. A standing ovation. For a delivery driver in a wrinkled uniform, he did not know what to do. He had not performed for an audience in 7 years. He had forgotten what it felt like to be seen, truly seen, for who he really was. The emotion of the moment hit him all at once, and he had to look down at the floor to steady himself. An older woman, in an elegant silver dress, pushed through the crowd toward him. She moved with the confidence of someone who was used to being in charge. Her eyes were red from crying, but her expression was one of absolute wonder. She stopped in front of him and simply stared for a moment, as if trying to understand what she had just witnessed. "Young man," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the lobby, "I have attended performances at the finest concert halls in the world. I have heard the greatest pianists of our generation, and I have never, not once, been moved the way you just moved me." The crowd murmured in agreement. She reached out and took his hand in both of hers. "Who are you? Where did you come from?" He looked at her, this elegant woman with kindness in her eyes, and he did not know how to answer. How could he explain 7 years of silence? How could he describe the journey from a scholarship student at one of the best music schools in the country to a man who pushed luggage carts for a living? Before he could find the words, another voice cut through the crowd. "He works here." Everyone turned. The manager had stepped forward, though he looked like he wished he could disappear. He was trying to regain control of the situation, trying to find some way to save face. "He is a delivery driver," the manager continued, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow. "I had no idea he could actually play. It was just a bit of fun. A little challenge to pass the time." The elegant woman turned to look at him. Her expression changed from wonder to something much colder. "A challenge?" she repeated. "What kind of challenge?" The manager shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. He suddenly seemed to realize that this woman was not just any guest, and he was right to be nervous. Because this woman owned the hotel. The lobby fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of people watching something unfold that they knew would be significant. The kind of silence that happens right before a storm. The manager's face changed color 3 times in the span of 5 seconds. First red, then white, then a sickly shade of gray. He had not recognized the hotel owner at first. She rarely visited this property, preferring to manage her empire of luxury hotels from her main office across the city. But here she was, standing in front of everyone, demanding answers. "I asked you a question," she said, her voice calm but sharp as glass. "What kind of challenge did you give this man?" The manager swallowed hard. His eyes darted around the crowd, searching for an escape route that did not exist. Every face was watching him now. The same staff members he had intimidated for years, the wealthy guests he had worked so hard to impress. They were all waiting to hear what he would say. "It was nothing serious," he stammered. "Just a friendly wager. A bit of motivation. A friendly wager," the owner repeated slowly. She turned to the nearest staff member, a young woman who worked at the front desk. "Is that true? Was it friendly?" The young woman looked terrified. She glanced at the manager, then back at the owner. For a moment, it seemed like she might stay quiet, might protect the man who signed her paychecks out of fear. But something had shifted in the room. The performance they had all just witnessed had changed something. "No, ma'am," she said quietly. "It was not friendly at all." Another staff member stepped forward, then another. One by one, they began to speak. They told the owner about the bet, $500 if he could play, a month of cleaning grease traps if he failed. They told her about the mocking tone, the cruel words, the public humiliation that was supposed to happen. They told her about all the other times too. The way the manager spoke to housekeepers, the way he treated the kitchen staff, the way he made everyone feel small and worthless on a daily basis. The owner listened to everything without interrupting. Her expression grew darker with each new story. When the staff members finally finished, she stood in silence for a long moment, processing what she had heard. Then she turned to the manager. "In my 30 years of building this company," she said, her voice low and controlled, "I have learned that the way you treat people when you think no one important is watching reveals exactly who you are." The manager opened his mouth to defend himself, but she held up her hand. "You thought this man was nobody. You thought you could mock him, humiliate him, turn him into entertainment for your own amusement. And do you know what that tells me about you?" She stepped closer to him, and even though she was several inches shorter, she seemed to tower over him in that moment. "It tells me that you have no place in any organization I own." A gasp rippled through the crowd. The manager's face crumpled. "Please," he said, his voice cracking. "I have worked here for 8 years. I have given everything to this hotel. And in those 8 years, how many people like him did you step on?" She gestured toward the delivery driver, who still sat at the piano bench, watching everything unfold with a stunned expression. "How many talented, hard-working people did you crush because you could, because it made you feel powerful?" The manager had no answer. He stood there, broken, exposed in front of everyone he had ever looked down upon. The owner turned away from him as if he had already ceased to exist. She walked back toward the piano, her heels clicking on the marble floor, and stopped in front of the delivery driver. Her expression softened. "I am so sorry," she said gently. "No one who works for me should ever be treated the way you were treated tonight." He shook his head slowly. "It is okay. I am used to it." "That is exactly the problem," she replied. "You should never have had to get used to it." She studied his face for a moment, seeing something there that most people had missed for years. The quiet dignity, the hidden depth, the talent that had been buried under uniforms and silence and survival. "Will you tell me your story?" she asked. "The real story? How does someone who plays like that end up pushing carts in my hotel?" And so, for the first time in 7 years, he told someone the truth. He told her about his childhood, about his mother who worked double shifts so he could have piano lessons. He told her about the scholarship, the professors who believed in him, the future that seemed so bright. He told her about his mother getting sick, about the impossible choice between his dreams and her care. He told her about losing her, about the debt, about the years of working and surviving while the musician inside him slowly went quiet. When he finished, there were tears in the owner's eyes. There were tears in many eyes throughout the lobby. "You gave up everything for your mother," she said softly. "That is not failure. That is love." He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had just created such beauty. "I thought that part of my life was over. I thought I had waited too long. You were wrong," she said firmly. "What you did tonight proves you were wrong. A gift like yours does not disappear. It waits." She reached into her small handbag and pulled out a business card. But before she could hand it to him, another voice spoke up from the crowd. "Excuse me." A man in his 60s stepped forward. He was wearing a simple but expensive suit, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. He had been standing near the back of the crowd during the entire performance, watching with unusual intensity. "I hope you will forgive the interruption," he said, addressing both the owner and the delivery driver. "But I could not leave without speaking to this young man." The owner tilted her head. "And you are?" He reached into his jacket and produced his own card, handing it to the delivery driver. "I run the classical music program at one of the conservatories here in Chicago. Before that, I spent 20 years as a talent scout for one of the largest recording labels in the country." He looked at the delivery driver with an expression of genuine amazement. "In all my years, I have heard thousands of pianists. Professionals, prodigies, competition winners. And I can tell you right now that what I heard tonight was something rare, something that cannot be taught." The delivery driver stared at the card in his hand, hardly able to process what was happening. "I do not understand," he said. "You want to help me?" The older man smiled warmly. "I want to offer you a second chance. A full scholarship to complete your training. If you want it. Performance opportunities. Connections in the industry. Everything you need to build the career you should have had years ago." The lobby erupted in excited murmurs. Staff members hugged each other. Guests nodded approvingly. It was like watching a scene from a movie. Except it was real. It was happening right here. Right now. The delivery driver looked at the card, then at the owner, then at the older man. His hands were trembling. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you do this for someone you just met?" The older man's smile grew softer. "Because talent deserves a chance. Because life is not fair, but sometimes people can be. And because I saw the way you played tonight. That was not just music. That was someone who has something important to say to the world." He put a hand on the delivery driver's shoulder. "The only question is whether you are ready to say it." For a long moment, the delivery driver did not speak. He looked around the lobby at all the faces watching him. He looked at the piano that had just changed his life. He thought about his mother, about what she had sacrificed, about what she would want him to do. And then, for the first time in a very long time, he smiled. Not a polite smile, not a small, guarded smile. A real smile, full of hope and possibility and something that looked like joy. "Yes," he said, his voice steady now. "I am ready." The crowd burst into applause once more, and somewhere in that moment, a man who had been invisible for 7 years finally began to be seen. 6 months passed. The world kept spinning, seasons changed, and life moved forward the way it always does. But for one man, those 6 months contained more change than the previous 7 years combined. On a cool evening in late April, a crowd gathered inside one of the most prestigious concert halls in Chicago. The seats were filled with music lovers, critics, industry professionals, and curious newcomers who had heard whispers of an unusual story. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, the stage lights glowed warm against the polished wood floor, and at the center of it all sat a magnificent grand piano, waiting. Backstage, the man who would soon walk out to play that piano stood alone in a quiet corner. He wore a simple black suit, the nicest piece of clothing he had ever owned. His hands were steady, his breathing was calm, but inside his chest, his heart was pounding with a mixture of nervousness and overwhelming gratitude. He thought about everything that had led to this moment. After that night at the hotel, his life had transformed in ways he never could have imagined. The conservatory director had been true to his word. Within weeks, he was enrolled in an advanced program designed for exceptional musicians who needed to complete their training. His professors pushed him hard, but they also recognized what the director had seen. This was not an ordinary student. This was someone with a rare gift that had simply been waiting for another chance. He practiced 6 hours a day, sometimes more. His fingers remembered everything. But there was rust to shake off, new techniques to learn, and old skills to sharpen. Some days were frustrating. Some days he doubted himself, wondering if he had waited too long, if the gap in his career was too wide to bridge. But he kept going. He kept showing up. He kept playing. The hotel owner had stayed in touch as well. She had personally ensured that he received full pay during his transition, even though he was no longer working. When he tried to refuse, she simply said that it was the least she could do. She told him that watching him play that night had reminded her why she had gotten into the hospitality business in the first place. It was supposed to be about making people feel something, about creating moments of beauty. Somewhere along the way, she had lost sight of that. He had helped her remember. As for the manager who had mocked him, his fate was swift and decisive. He was terminated that same night and escorted from the building within the hour. Word spread quickly through the industry, as it always does. No reputable hotel would hire him after what had happened. The last anyone heard, he had left Chicago entirely and moved to a small town where nobody knew his name. Some people felt sorry for him. Most did not. But the delivery driver did not spend much time thinking about the manager. He had wasted too many years being invisible. He did not want to waste any more being bitter. Instead, he focused on the future. And now, here he was, standing backstage at his debut concert. The moment he had dreamed about since he was a child, pressing keys at his grandmother's house. The moment his mother had believed in when she sold her wedding ring to pay for his lessons. He wished she could be here. A stagehand approached and told him it was time. He nodded, took one last deep breath, and walked toward the stage. The applause that greeted him as he stepped into the light was warm and welcoming. He bowed slightly, then made his way to the piano. Before he sat down, he paused and looked out at the audience. There, in the front row, he saw faces he recognized. The hotel owner was there, elegant as always, smiling at him with pride. The conservatory director sat beside her, his expression calm, but his eyes shining with anticipation. And next to them, filling an entire section of the front row, were the people who had made this moment possible in ways they probably did not even realize. His former co-workers from the hotel, the housekeeper who had cried during his performance in the lobby, the young woman from the front desk who had found the courage to speak up against the manager, the bellboy who had dropped a guest's coat because he was so captivated by the music. The cooks, the maintenance workers, the drivers, the cleaners, they were all there, dressed in their best clothes, beaming up at him like family. He had personally invited each and every one of them, free tickets, best seats in the house. It was the only thing he had insisted on when the concert was being planned. These people had witnessed the lowest moment of his life turn into the beginning of something new. They deserved to be here for this. His eyes grew wet, but he did not look away. He let them see his emotion. He let them know how much their presence meant. Then he sat down at the piano. The hall fell silent. 2,000 people held their breath. He placed his fingers on the keys, and he began to play. The music that filled the concert hall that night was unlike anything most of the audience had ever heard. It was technically flawless, yes. The speed, the precision, the control were all remarkable. But it was the feeling behind the notes that made people lean forward in their seats, that made them forget where they were, that made some of them weep without knowing why. He played pieces by the great composers, the ones he had studied and loved since childhood. But he also played something he had written himself during those 6 months of training. A piece dedicated to his mother, a piece that told the story of sacrifice and love and loss and hope, all without a single word. When he reached the final movement of that piece, he closed his eyes and let the music carry him. He saw his mother's face, young and tired and beautiful. He saw her working late shifts, counting coins, dreaming of a better life for her son. He saw her lying in that hospital bed, holding his hand, telling him she was proud of him, and he played for her. He played every note for her. When the piece ended, the silence lasted for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds that felt like an eternity. Then the audience erupted. The applause was deafening. People rose to their feet, shouting, cheering, some of them crying openly. The front row was the loudest of all. His former co-workers clapping and whistling like they were at a celebration, which in many ways, they were. He stood from the piano and bowed. When he straightened up, he looked at the front row one more time. The hotel owner was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. The conservatory director was nodding slowly, satisfied. The housekeeper was sobbing with joy, clutching the hand of the woman next to her. He smiled at them. A real smile. Full and open and free. After the concert, there was a reception. People lined up to shake his hand, to tell him how much his music had moved them, to ask about his remarkable story. Critics praised his technique. Industry professionals talked about recording contracts and international tours. It was everything he had once dreamed of, finally coming true. But the moment he treasured most came near the end of the evening. The housekeeper from the hotel approached him shyly. She was an older woman who had worked at the Grand Monarch for over 20 years. Invisible in the same way he had once been invisible. "I just wanted to tell you something," she said quietly. "That night, in the lobby, when you played, something changed inside me. I went home and told my husband that I was going to finish the nursing degree I started years ago. I had given up on it. But watching you, I thought, if he can do it, maybe I can too." He felt his heart swell. "That is the most wonderful thing anyone has said to me tonight," he told her. And he meant it, because that was the real gift. Not the concert hall. Not the applause. Not the career that was finally beginning. The real gift was knowing that his story might give someone else the courage to try again. He had been invisible for 7 years. He had buried his dreams so deep he thought they were gone forever. But they were not gone. They were just waiting. And if his story could help even one other person believe that their dreams were waiting too, then everything he had been through was worth it. Every single moment.